court in its discretion would not be making any order adverse to the council. That's the result, isn't it, from that particular case?
It didn't quite get to that point, yes, but the council still they were told to overturn it, otherwise it would have been overturned.
Well, it kind of vindicated the advice, didn't it?
I think so. I agree with you on that.
Mr. Chairman, I think to describe HBRC as being is functioning as an operating company is not correct. What it is doing is, on the council's behalf, it is involved in a project investigation which covers a certain scope and has a finite end to it, which could even be in a month's time or a couple of months' time when a D&C price comes through. Or, on the other hand, it'll go through until towards the middle of next year and make a recommendation at which stage to the council, at which stage there would be a transition through to another form of entity, which was a subsidiary or a company partly owned by HBRC. And at that stage it would be appropriate, in my view, for there not to be council members on that entity, but the council members would then just carry on as their function as directors of a holding company. But I do take issue with it being described as an operating company when it is doing, in effect, a project task right now. And I'd quite like Mr. Webster's view in that regard.
I'd agree with that. The hypothetical was that HBRC was an operating company. There may be certain aspects of that, but until it flies, it's really in a holding pattern, I suppose, getting its lining its troops up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd sort of like to tease out some of the aspects of this, because if we come back to the options that are there, and one of the options is that for the investigations on the Ruataniwha project, particular people with skills and that have been appointed advisors, and the option is we'll put them on. Are these people then going to be our council decision makers on the port? And the port is one of our major, we've identified that as a strategic asset. So where does this stop, and where does it start, and where does it stop? Because also on the background are some other investment opportunities which the holding company is tasked with investigating. Is every time they investigate something, does that then involve conflict of interest? I mean, one of the investigations that's on the book is Nararora. Maybe that can come under the new Water Co, as it was originally seen, but it could be quite a different makeup that went ahead and did that. So it could be again back to the holding company to handle the initial investigations, or it could sit, as it did with Ruataniwha in the first instance, solely in council. So we've actually got rather a mixture of models, and do we actually stand back at this stage because of political fear from actually exercising our proper governance of our assets, such as the port?
I suppose my answer to that question is that you've got to look at it from the viewpoint of what decision is being made. So if it's a decision of HBRC and they've got advice on that particular decision, then they're entitled, the directors of HBRC are entitled, taking into account the best interests of the company as opposed to its stakeholders. HBRC is going to make that decision based on that advice. I see no difficulty with then, because it's a wholly owned subsidiary, difficulty with that recommendation if it had to go up to be ratified or approved by council, the same advice given to council, bearing in mind that people have a different set of parameters. They're not doing it in the best interests of council. They're doing it in the best interests of ratepayers and best interests of the region. It would be nonsensical. Sorry, if I could just finish off. I think it'd be nonsensical to say that every time you make a decision about this, at whatever level, you need a fresh set of advisors. That might be good in terms of objectivity, and you might decide to do that anyway, but I don't think the decision is in any way restricted or bad at law just because you've got the same advisors presenting to council. You really ought to sit, I think, in the seat at the time and say, what advice can I receive here? I've got a recommendation from HBRC. I've got all of their advisors' reports, and I've got some supplementary material here, but I'm looking at it from a different point of view, sitting on regional council as opposed to sitting on HBRC.
Councillor, I think you've referred to, I think, option 3 in the HBRC board paper, which looks at the appointment of alternate directors to council, or external appointments. And I think that comes back to the whole structure around this particular debate, which is around determining, first milestone is whether or not there is a risk, and then secondly, then moving on to looking at those different options. And I think that if you do determine that there is a risk and you want to take it further, then we need to look a lot more seriously at what the options are, and you may come up with one or more different ones today, and get further advice on those, because there are, as you've identified, I think, other factors that have to be taken into account besides decision making around the Ruataniwha water storage project.
Yeah, yes, I think you're right. As I said, Mr. Webster, probably there is no legal risk if you're looking at in definitive legal terms. I guess it's probably a political risk in the sense that it's going to be terribly difficult for the public to comprehend directors perhaps at the HBRC level holding a point of view and exercising their vote in that direction, then coming to this table and doing a 360 and voting the other way. That's going to be politically very, very difficult to sell, and I doubt very much whether the public will, if they do agree with it, or if they do understand it, would agree with it. I see this, Mr. Chairman, really as a political argument. I don't, or a political problem to solve. I don't really see it as a legal problem. I think the legality, as Mr. Webster's pointed out, is quite clearly there. Whether it is a holding company or a partial holding or a partial operating company, I think clearly it's operating within the law. I think what we've got to deal with is a straight political issue.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there's an equal, if not greater, political risk in removing council representation from the HBRC board and, in effect, abdicating responsibility to independent persons to, on their own, make a recommendation to the council. And I just would not support that at all. What I could support is that the process carries itself through to a point where the HBRC board is in a position to make a decision on a recommendation to the council, at which stage, in terms of that crucial vote, that the three expert advisors who are not directors but are members of the Ruataniwha scheme committee, in effect, take up an appointment as alternates for the three council board members, and that they take part in the vote, and that the three councillor members do not take part in that particular vote. But I just see it's absolutely crucial on this thing that the council must have its appointed elected representatives in that board and working right through this vitally important process, not just taking reports once every month.
Can I just tease that out a little bit? Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Webster, our constitution, if you cast your mind back, that was a process, one way of describing it, to get to that final constitution. What changes, and I'm sorry I'm asking you this cold, you weren't brought up to speed before this meeting, but can you see any great changes required in the constitution to accommodate something like that, or even councillors removing completely?
This is a management tool to manage a perceived conflict of interest, and there is, I think, in that constitution, I'd have to check, but it's stock standard in constitutions to have the ability to appoint alternates at any time. So it's certainly feasible and possible to appoint those advisory consultants into an alternate position as a director, and that can be done by a very simple process.
So to tease it out even further, those people could step into the breach and make other crucial decisions along the way, i.e. picking a final D&C provider.
Absolutely.
Those sorts of issues.
They're stepping into the shoes of those councillor directors who have seen fit to stand back.
I can't see why councillor directors should have to stand back on a decision on a D&C contractor. That's not committing the council. The only time the council is committed is when a final recommendation is made and this council makes a decision.
Just teasing it out.
I have no problem putting one hat on and taking another hat off at any time. I do it every day.
Councillor Ramsell.
Just a couple of things, Mr. Chair. Firstly, this paper has a set of recommendations to it, which do involve the councillor directors of HBRC. Have those councillors, have they made a decision or discussed whether it's appropriate for them to vote on this set of recommendations today or individual ones?
Well, I can tell you that.
What basis?
Well, because this is the recommendations are about the council director's role on HBRC and conflict. The whole things that this paper is all about, their own conflict of interest. So does that apply to these recommendations here today about making a decision, council making a decision regarding those conflicts?
HBRC was asked to explore the issue and put up some options, and that's what's happened.
Yeah, well, there's recommendations here for our council to decide on.
We don't need to follow them directly. We don't need to pick one today. Let's wait till we get to the resolution, and your answer will be a lot clearer.
Well, I'm just wondering because one of the councillors, his name is on this paper here. I'm just wondering, you haven't had a discussion about that? There's no decision made about that?
He's given you his answer to that. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I've got a couple of other questions. Thank you. So just to carry on for this point about number 3 on page 10, what would it look like if there were appointments of alternates to councillor directors? Is that a practical option to do that? What would that actually? What was in the writer's mind when he put that as a direction, as an alternative, please?